Okay, welcome back to another Between the Pages book chat. And today our guest is fantasy author Richard Fierce, and he's here to talk about his series, The Dragon Riders of Osnan. And it looks fabulous, and I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Thank you. Like you said, my name is Richard Pierce. That is my real last name, by the way. And I write fantasy, mostly young adult fantasy, but I have some epic, dark, gritty type of stuff. But my main jam is the young adult fantasy. And a little bit of space opera, kind of diversify. But yeah, Dragon Riders of Ozen is my flagship series. It's 10 books, and the first one is Trial by Sorcery.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the series. What's it about, and what kind of epic adventures are in it?
Sure, yeah. So it's obviously Dragon Riders. It's about people who ride dragons and the bond they share. So if you've read Aragon or Dragon Riders of Pern, you kind of get the basic idea. But it's about a young man who wants to follow in his father's footsteps. His father was a dragon rider, and he's a war hero. So in the first book, when you're kind of seeing him meet people at this dragon rider school, every time he mentions who his father is, they're like, "Oh, he's a hero. I knew him, or I met him one time, and great man, and he's a hero." And so he kind of hears all of this, but his dad died, about 10 years before that period in time. And his father and so there's kind of like a system of, highborns and lowborns, and it's based on hair color. So if you're blonde or redheaded, you're nobles and royalty. And if your hair is black or brown, then you're lowborn, you're in the bottom of society pretty much. And him and his family are lowborns, but because his dad is a war hero, he was given a title and lands, but those lands are dead. His dad died a war hero. His mother just recently passed away from disease, and so he has nothing. And so making it into the Dragon Rider school is everything. He has to get in, or that's it. And there's 3 tests that someone has to take in order to become a dragon rider: compassion, magical aptitude, and armed combat. So he is at a disadvantage because one of his arms was injured in a childhood accident, and so it's maimed pretty much, and it's his right hand, the main hand that he uses. And so when it comes to armed combat, he's a little challenged as far as like wielding a sword and the physical strength aspect of that. But he has to take those 3 tests, and it's kind of why the title is Trial by Sorcery. There's a lot of magic involved, dragons obviously, and the side character, she's also a main character as the series progresses, but her name is Marin, and she's the complete opposite of him. She is stubborn, hard-headed, a rule breaker. She's modeled after my wife, and she's so she has her own way of doing things, and there's some things about her that are hinted at, and he kind of wonders like why she's so odd. And there's some things that get revealed as the story progresses, but she's kind of like the opposite, like I said, of what he is. He's all about following the rules, and for good reason, given his arm and what happened. And so he basically goes through the tests, and while he's going through the tests, there's some things that happen in the first one that kind of allude to this character called the False King, which is who his father died defeating. That he may not actually be dead, the bad guy. So he starts to unravel some things, and Marin is involved in that. And while that's happening, he's still going through and progressing through the tests, and someone within the school is trying to basically sabotage test results and cause mischief. And she's an agent for somebody. And so it's kind of classic fantasy, but it's young adult. He's coming of age, and so is the girl that is in the story. So and so if you like Harry Potter, the whole magic school, a lot of people said it kind of feels like that. The school, there's dragon riders, there's magic. And interestingly, I've never read Harry Potter, so I have seen the movies, so I got the general bit of the story of that, but I've never read the books, so shame on me. But people compare it to that and Aragon. So,
Yeah. Well, I've never read the Harry Potter books either, so
hey, yeah,
we've been outed together.
yeah,
Okay, but it's an excellent marketing point, though. Harry Potter meets Dragon Riders of Pern, so
yeah. That's
that sounds like a great book. So tell us a little bit about the main character. What's he like?
like I said, he's the kind of the rule follower. And the biggest reason of why in the first book he's following the rules so strictly is this is all he's got. So he's got the one shot to get in the school, and if he doesn't make it, he doesn't know what he's going to do because the lands, there's no crops. His parents are gone, so it's like it's do or die. And so he is a rule follower. He's a bit meek and he's humble, and he's grown up his whole life essentially being made fun of because of his arm and everything. And you see that even in there, and even in the first book, where some of the other students who are testing to be a dragon rider are nobles or highborns, and they're kind of you can't ride a dragon. I bet you can't even hold a sword. Like you look at your arm. Things like that. And it's really about real life. Things that you can relate to, like people. When you're in school, especially younger age, kids can be really mean. So I kind of wanted something relatable that people could relate to with the main character. And it's written in first person, so it's all told through his point of view. And he's he's just a normal guy. He's not a wizard. He has no magical power. And as the book will explain, there are some people who, even though you're not magically inclined, when you become bonded to a dragon, you do learn magic through your dragon. And so he's kind of wondering if that's going to happen or what kind of dragon he's going to bond with. And so, so he's just a regular guy. I try to make him, relatable to just the average person, because a lot of times you see like overpowered characters or, people who are just, they're naturally good at everything. And it's like, that's not always the case for people, so he's kind of normal.
Does he have any father issues, like being overshadowed by his father's reputation or trying to live up to it?
That's a good question. No one has ever asked that before. No, not really. He wants to, do what his father did, but no, he's not. That would have been an interesting thing to put in there, I guess, to get out of the shadow.
Yeah, well, he's a well-adjusted son then.
Yeah. Well, also, like, he was young when his dad died, so it wasn't like he was really got to know all that, that stuff. And that's the other thing too, that as he learns about some things about being a dragon rider, the girl Marin, she's like, did your dad not tell you anything about being a dragon rider? Like, these are things that I would assume he would have told you. And he goes, and it kind of is a revelation. And he's like, no, he kind of kept that part of his life private. He didn't really talk about things. Like, I saw his dragon like a handful of times, and it wasn't like it was like that was a separate part of his life, So no, he doesn't really clash with being in his dad's shadow, and no one really expects anything of him other than they just mention your dad's a hero, and he's like, yeah, I know, so, But that is an interesting question. I've never considered that before.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene or type of scene for you to write in the series?
Ooh, that would be in the fourth book. So without giving too much away with the plot, the way the plot goes, there are things in the first book that will eventually play out as late as the sixth and seventh books. So there are things that kind of come in, but probably in the fourth book, there's a scene where he's on a island called the Island of Lost Souls, and it's where those who've died but haven't passed over for whatever reason, they have unfinished tasks or what have you. They're on this island, and he thinks that his father's spirit is there, and he goes there to seek out if his dad's there, and if he is, he's going to try to bring him back across the ocean and bring him back to life essentially. And he he has a scene where he's on a thing called the Path of Sacrifice, and it was really hard to write that because the whole purpose of this path is to literally you sacrifice everything. So he loses the closest person to him. He has to go without his dragon, and at one point the bond between him and his dragon gets severed, and it's like it's like losing a loved one basically. And so it was really difficult to write that book because I knew what the purpose of it was. And so knowing that you're going to put your character through some really, hard stuff is it's a little crazy, I guess. And then if you get close to your characters, it could be emotional a little bit, So probably those scenes in that book were probably pretty hard, just because of that aspect.
Okay, so conversely, what was your favorite scene or type of scene to write in the series?
There's a wedding that happens in the ninth book. So I don't want to say whose wedding, but there was a wedding, and it was really cool to kind of create my own, I guess you could say, traditions that you would do for a wedding. Because in America, it's like you do vows and, it's a pretty standard thing. But in this series, there are different cultures. So there's a culture that's like the Japanese culture. They're the Terranese. And so I kind of mixed some Japanese culture and some other different cultures as far as like what they do with the wedding ceremony and things like that. And so that was my favorite scene because I knew that it was going to happen at some point. I didn't know what book it was going to happen in, but when it kind of fell in like it's going to be this book, crafting that whole scene it was pretty awesome to write that.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about some of the secondary characters. What are they like?
So the main one is Marin. Like I said, she's stubborn and fiery. She's a redhead, and she's a rule breaker, and she is. I can't give anything away about who she is, but she's the main character, and then of course they're dragons. So they go pretty much on every quest together as a pair and a team, and their dragons, of course, are the supporting characters as well, if not kind of the main characters with them. But there's some villains, of course. The False King. He's a man who tried to take over the throne of Osnan. That's why he's called the False King. There's a man called the Necromancer, who is an ally of the False King. There is some other bad guys that are kind of minor, but they play their part in different books. In the second book, when Eldwin, who's the main character, meets his dragon is going to be sold to some unknown party, and the bad guy in that series is kind of like a black market trader, and he deals in basically capturing dragons when they're young, and then kind of essentially torturing them into obedience, and then he sells them as pets or whatever to people looking for those kinds of things. And so Eldwin and his dragon, when they bond, it's called a bond of necessity because the dragon needs to escape from that situation, and he needs he wants to bond with the dragon. It's his ambition to be like his father. So it's the only bond type that I explore is called a bond of necessity, but there are other ones that exist. But that was the main one because that's what he goes through. And so it was a necessity for both of them. And so it's one of the strongest bonds that a rider can have with their dragon. So yeah, that's
Okay. So what are your characters afraid of?
failure. For obvious reasons, he doesn't want to get kicked out of the school. He, that's all he's got, but also, not, I guess, failure on many points, but in the first book, failure on getting kicked out of school. The second one is he's questing to find a dragon. And, when he finds one, she gets injured. And so he is worried that, he finally found a dragon and now he might lose her. So he's afraid of losing her, especially since they bonded and, they can share each other's thoughts and the feelings and everything. So that, and then as the relationship between him and Marin, progresses through the books, he's afraid of losing her for reasons I can't explain without giving away anything. But things like that. So yeah, failure.
Okay, so you write fantasy, obviously, and you mentioned you've written some sci-fi. So are there any other genres that you'd like to try or have tried?
I have written romance / erotica under a pen name. Yeah, I don't anymore. I did that for about a year, and really just to see if it was a viable way to bring in some extra money to fund the fantasy stuff. Cover art and all that stuff is not cheap, so I did it for a year, and it did generate more money than I had sold on any of my fantasy stuff at that time. But after about that year mark, I kind of was getting burnt out on writing about that stuff. So I switched gears back to fantasy, and then, that's how Dragon Riders of Ozan kind of came into existence. Was that the money I made from that kind of funded the cover art and the, paperback print and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's, I've done that. I wrote about 100 short stories. So I was pretty prolific when I was writing, and I was in the top 100 on Amazon before they took away the author ranking, under that pen name. So, it was interesting to see, but ranking does not always equate to money. So that's, kind of
true.
deceiving, So, but
Okay. So I think we'll wrap it up here for today. And I'd like to thank you for being a guest. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
yeah, thank you for having me.
And I have linked his series in the description below if anyone wants to check it out. And I do encourage them because it sounds awesome. And the covers are terrific, by the way. Love the covers.
Thank you.
And that's it for today. But join us next weekend. We will be only having one live chat next weekend, but we will be having a recorded, rescheduled chat. So there will be two. But from now until the end of the year, we're going to a one chat a weekend schedule. So if that made any sense, I'm glad. So anyway, that's all for today. So bye for now.